Right now, there are four specific numbers, one for age 30, one for 40, one for 50, and one for 60, that tell you exactly where the average Canadian stands with their tax-free savings account. And by the end of this video, you are going to know all four of them, along with something far more important than the numbers themselves. Before we get into it, hit subscribe, because I break down the real financial numbers behind Canadian retirement and savings that nobody else explains this honestly. I know comparing your own savings to a national average can bring up all kinds of feelings. Sometimes relief, sometimes worry, sometimes a strange mix of both, depending on which number you land beside. I want to say clearly, right at the start, that wherever you or your children or your grandchildren fall on this list, it does not define anyone's financial worth or their future. What these numbers actually offer is something far more useful than judgment. They offer a mirror, an honest, unemotional snapshot of what typical Canadians have actually managed to save inside one of the most powerful savings tools this country has ever offered its citizens. And understanding that mirror clearly can help you make smarter decisions for the years still ahead. Here is something worth sitting with before we walk through the numbers themselves. There is a second figure hiding behind every single one of these age brackets, one that almost nobody talks about. And it may honestly be more revealing than the balance itself. It has to do with how much unused available room most Canadians are leaving completely untouched inside their TFSA year after year, without ever realizing what that empty space is quietly costing them. I'm going to walk you through exactly what that number looks like at each age. But first, let's cover the balances everyone actually asks about. Let's start at age 30, because this is often the point where people first start seriously wondering if they are behind. According to the most recent Canada Revenue Agency data, the average Canadian in their early 30s holds around $16,760 in their TFSA. If your own balance sits somewhere close to that, you are sitting right alongside most of your peers, neither dramatically ahead nor dramatically behind. This is typically the stage of life when major expenses, like a first home, a young family, or simply establishing a career, are competing hard for every available dollar. And that competition shows clearly in how modest this average balance actually is. By age 40, that average climbs to around $20,670. Now, pause on that for a second, because the jump from 30 to 40 is smaller than most people expect, especially considering an entire decade passed in between. This tells an honest story about the middle years of adult life in Canada, a stretch often dominated by mortgage payments, raising children, and the countless expenses that come with building a stable household, all of which quietly compete with long-term savings for every spare dollar available. At age 50, the average balance sits around $30,190. Here is where something genuinely important starts happening, and it deserves real attention. This decade often marks a turning point, the stage where mortgages get paid down, children become financially independent, and suddenly there is more breathing room in the monthly budget than there has been in 20 years. You can see that shift reflected directly in the acceleration of TFSA balances through someone's 50s, as more disposable income finally becomes available to redirect toward long-term savings. And finally, at age 60, the average Canadian TFSA balance reaches roughly $45,109. If you are approaching or already in this age bracket and your own balance sits somewhere near this figure, you are perfectly in line with your peers across the country. But here is where I need to circle back to that second number I promised you earlier, because it changes the entire meaning of everything we just walked through. At every single one of these age brackets, the average unused TFSA contribution room sitting completely empty is often larger, sometimes dramatically larger, than the amount actually saved. For Canadians in their early 30s, the average unused room sits above $63,000, meaning the typical 30-something has access to nearly 4 times more tax-free saving space than they have actually used. By age 60, that unused room still sits above $47,000 for the average Canadian, meaning even after decades of adult life, the typical retiree entering their 60s still has enormous tax-free savings capacity sitting completely dormant. Think about what that actually represents. Every dollar of contribution room left unused is a permanent missed opportunity because unlike some registered accounts, unused TFSA room from previous years never expires. It simply accumulates, silently waiting, while the tax-free growth that could have been happening inside it never gets the chance to begin. Let's talk honestly about why this gap exists, because understanding the reason matters far more than simply knowing the number. For many Canadians, the TFSA gets treated purely as an emergency fund, a place to park a modest cushion of cash rather than a genuine long-term investment vehicle. That is not necessarily the wrong choice. Having accessible emergency savings matters enormously, but it does mean that a huge share of Canadians are missing out on the real power of this account, which comes from investing inside it, not simply holding cash. A TFSA holding cash at a modest interest rate behaves very differently over 30 years than a TFSA holding a diversified portfolio of investments compounding tax-free the entire time. The word tax-free is doing enormous work in that sentence, because every single dollar of growth inside a TFSA, whether from dividends, interest, or capital gains, comes out completely untaxed for life, no matter how large that account eventually grows. I want to open a second door here because there is a surprising detail buried inside this data that connects directly to retirement planning for anyone watching this in their 50s or 60s right now. TFSA withdrawals do not count as income for the purpose of calculating eligibility for the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the additional monthly benefit available to lower-income seniors. This is enormous, and most Canadians approaching retirement have no idea it even matters. Money withdrawn from an RRSP or a RIF counts as taxable income and can reduce or even eliminate GIS eligibility, while money withdrawn from a TFSA does not touch that calculation at all. This means a retiree with savings split between a TFSA and an RRSP has real strategic flexibility that someone with all their savings locked inside a single RRSP simply does not have, allowing careful retirees to manage their taxable income year by year in a way that can preserve thousands of dollars in government benefits that would otherwise quietly disappear. Here is another layer worth understanding, especially if you are watching this while thinking about your own children or grandchildren rather than yourself. The TFSA contribution limit has grown every single year since it launched back in 2009, and for 2026, that annual limit sits at $7,000. Anyone who was 18 or older when the program began now has access to a cumulative total contribution room of $109,000, an enormous amount of permanently available tax-free saving space that many Canadians, especially younger ones just starting their financial journey, have no idea has been quietly accumulating in their name the entire time, whether they ever contributed a single dollar or not. So what does all of this actually mean for you practically, starting today? If your own balance sits below the average for your age group, that is not a verdict on your financial discipline, especially if life brought expenses these averages do not account for. Raising a family alone, supporting aging parents, or simply living through years where saving anything at all felt impossible. What matters now is not where you have been, it is what you do with the years still ahead. If you have unused contribution rooms sitting dormant, and based on these numbers, the overwhelming majority of Canadians do, even modest, consistent contributions from this point forward, invested rather than left sitting in cash, can meaningfully close that gap over time thanks to the simple, powerful mathematics of compounding. And if your balance sits above the average, take real pride in that, because it reflects genuine discipline and foresight, qualities that deserve recognition, not quiet dismissal. But even then, it is worth checking whether that money is actually working for you through real investments, or whether it has simply been sitting as cash, missing out on decades of potential tax-free growth that this account was specifically designed to provide. There is one more thing worth saying clearly, because it ties this entire conversation together in a way pure numbers never quite capture. Money habits are rarely inherited through instruction alone. They are inherited through observation, through watching how the people around us actually behave with money, quietly, over years, without ever sitting down for a formal lesson. If you have grandchildren or younger family members in your life, the single most powerful thing you can pass along may not be a specific dollar figure or even a financial gift. It may simply be the story of your own relationship with saving, the mistakes you made along the way, the habits that eventually worked, and the honest truth about how differently things might have unfolded had someone unfolded tax-free compounding to you clearly decades earlier. That kind of honest storytelling costs nothing to give, and it can genuinely change the trajectory of a young person's entire financial life. Here is the truth I want to leave you with, and I want it to genuinely stick with you long after this video ends. These four numbers, 16,760 at 30, 20,670 at 40, 30,190 at 50, and 45,109 at 60 are not a scoreboard measuring your success as a person. They are simply a starting point, a piece of honest information that can help you or someone you love make a clearer, more confident decision about the years still ahead. Nothing more and nothing less. The single most powerful thing about a TFSA has never been how much money starts inside it. It has always been time and the quiet, patient compounding that happens when tax-free growth is given decades rather than years to do its work. If this video gave you a clearer picture of where you stand and what that unused room in your own TFSA might actually be worth over time, subscribe to this channel, because I am going to keep bringing you the honest, practical breakdowns of Canadian savings and retirement money that nobody else explains this clearly. The kind of information that actually helps you plan with confidence instead of guesswork. And if you have a child or a grandchild in their 20s or 30s who has never heard how much tax-free room is quietly waiting for them, share this video with them today. Because the earlier they understand what this account can really do, the more time they will have to let it work in their favor. And time, more than any single dollar amount, has always been the real engine behind every one of these numbers.